Okay, very good. Very good.
So I hope you can hear also quite well. It seems.
I can hear now. Do you want to stand at the board and talk?
Yes.
So we can test that.
Let's see, because I'm using the. So here it's fine.
Yeah. I can hear you fine. I can see you in the board fine. It looks good. Are you in your office? Are you in your office?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
I am.
Because some people during pandemic, they set up the board in their house like this. So they could.
So let me turn the computer.
So I think that, yeah.
So you're not in Cambridge now, right?
I'm not. I'm in Chicago. So it's 9 in the morning here.
Ah, okay.
You're still in Lyon, right?
Right, that's true.
Yeah. How is it there? Is everything back to normal, or are you still with restrictions?
No, it's rather back to normal. So soon,
Yeah.
Soon we won't need to wear mask, more or less.
Yep.
Which is...
That's the same here. My students have to, but the professors do not necessarily. So we're sort of right on the borderline. So it's nice to have, well, sort of real things over the reels. Right? Everything is, most of the talks are not over the reels.
So it's quite a while that you're running this seminar, it seems, no?
Yeah, I mean, it's not, okay, so, I mean, it's really Vanya and Jesus that are running it, both of whom tell me they're away, they're not able to come due to COVID type things, but it started at the beginning of the pandemic that Vanya really was running a sort of online thing, and it became this, and it runs now twice a week and has done for whatever it is now, 2 years. It's great.
Yeah.
And nearly all the talks are recorded, and so they're all available online. That's great.
That's good. I see. And so many people are following, it seems.
I think, I think the mailing list, that announces the talk has, I think, 1,000 people on it. So that's pretty impressive, right? I mean, you think even our national algebraic geometry mailing list is sort of probably much smaller than that.
But don't expect them all today.
Oh yeah, 1,000. No, but I'm sure they'll all watch the recording. No, but still, it's sort of impressive, right?
Yes.
No, I don't know what we usually get. I don't know what we usually get. I think between 10 and 20 people is sort of typical, at least the ones I've seen recently. Let's give another minute because people come in right at the last minute with Zoom.
And of course, unfortunately, I won't discuss algebraic geometry today, as I said.
That's okay. That's okay. That's okay. I'm going to start a minute late, so take a full hour. Let me start in 1 minute.
Okay.
Because as I say, people are still joining, so there's no reason not to. Okay, Jean-Yves, you're ready?
Yes.
Everyone, thank you for coming. We're looking forward to this talk today. Please feel free to ask questions over voice, or if you ask in the chat, I will ask the speaker. It's my pleasure today to have Jean-Yves Belchanger to speak on shellable tilings on simplicial complexes.
Right, so thank you very much for this invitation. And so as I already, I apologize in front of organizers, but my talk today won't be on quite on algebraic geometry, but rather on some discrete geometry, because it turns out it's a couple of years say that I'm getting interested in this subject. So let me take this opportunity to discuss this notion of Morse tilings on finite simplicial complexes. So a notion which I'm trying to develop, and what I'm discussing today actually it's some work that I started with a colleague from Lyon, Nermin Salegi. I explained there is maybe 2 points of view. So one point of view is this point of view of tiling. Another one, more topological, say, would be that such tilings would provide some, I would say, pinched angle decomposition in this piecewise linear category for triangulated manifolds. So let's see this in a moment. So let me start by simplicial complexes. By the way, it is related with several also classical notion of this subject or combinatorics. So I discuss shellable complexes. It is also related with the discrete Morse theory of Robin Forman. Hopefully I can say a word, and to the theory of H vectors, which probably I won't discuss. So let me start with simplicial complexes to make clear what are the objects. And actually I spent some time on this because there are 2 points of view, I would say. One point of view is geometrical, and another one is more combinatorial. So let me give the 2 of them and provide several examples. So three main class of examples. So first, what is a simplex? I guess everybody knows, but it is the convex hull of, say, n+1 points which are affinely independent in some real affine space. So let me write this down. An n simplex convex hull of n+1 points can be independent in some affine space. So, of course, the zero simplex is basically just a vertex. One simplex is an edge. Two simplex is the interior of a triangle. Simplex is a tetrahedron, and so on. And up to isomorphism, there is one per each dimension. Then what is a finite simplicial complex? It's a finite collection of such simplices such that any 2 of them are either disjoint or intersect along a face. So what is a face? A face of a simplex is the convex hull of a subset of points. Is the convex hull simplicial complex the finite collection of simplices such that any two of them are either disjoint or intersect along a face of each of them. I hope you can read what I'm writing. For instance, the boundary of a three-simplex is a two-dimensional simplicial complex, or I don't know, the union of a triangle and an edge. They intersect along a vertex. This is a simplicial complex. So this, I would say, is a geometric definition of a simplicial complex. And as you see, the simplicial complex is already embedded in some real affine space. So a more combinatorial or abstract definition of such an object is the following. So this is, say, an alternative definition. In this abstract definition, an n-simplex is just a set of cardinality n+1. And the face is nothing but a subset of this set of cardinality n+1. So this is prime set, an n-simplex, the set cardinality n+1. Face is a subset. And then in the setting, what is a finite simplicial complex, say an abstract simplicial complex? Well, it is first of all a collection of a finite set, and which is going to be the vertices, the set of vertices of the simplicial complex, and a collection of subsets of this finite set, with the property that every singleton vertex is a subset, and once you have a subset, you have all of its subsets. Let me try to write this down. Finite simplicial complex, or abstract. The finite set is a collection of subsets of a finite set. Let me denote it by V of k, the vertices. It's a collection of subsets which contains all subsets of its elements. I mean, once you have a subset, you have also all parts of it, and all singletons. Three elements of G of k. This is an abstract simplicial complex. So, how do we pass from one definition to the other? Well, if you are given a finite simplicial complex, say, embedded in some affine space, then you may just consider its finite set of vertices, which is going to be the set V of k. And also, for each simplex in this simplicial complex, you consider the vertices of this simplex, which is definitely a subset of V of k. So this is the collection of subsets which you consider. Each subset of V of k which you consider in your collection is the subset of vertices of a simplex in your simplicial complex. right? For instance, and so, okay, so this would be, say, the face. Okay, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm in our office. Oui, je suis en plein exposé, je peux pas répondre. Okay. So now how to go the other way around? Once you have an abstract simplicial complex, you may consider its geometric realization. So I would say this arrow from an abstract simplicial complex to such a geometric one is the geometric realization. So, of course, as it is defined here, there is the choice. Well, as I said, such a geometric simplicial complex is already embedded in some real affine space. So there is, in a way, this choice of affine space. But let me give for you a canonical choice of such an affine space, which is the following. So if you have a finite simplicial complex, say K, you may consider the following affine space, which is going to be the affine space supporting the geometric realization, which is the set of functions from V of K into R, such that the sum over all vertices of K of f of V equals 1. So this is an affine space, and inside this affine space, you leave the geometric realization of the simplicial complex, which is likewise the set of functions that with non-negative coefficients, such that not only this set of coefficients, which are the barycentric coordinates, so to say, of points in the convex hull of the vertices. So the sum should be equal to 1, and moreover, the support of the function belongs to K. So as I said, this abstract simplicial complex is a collection of subsets of V of K. For each subset, which one has to think as the vertices of a simplex, you recover the convex hull abstractly, so by taking these all the possible barycentric coordinates with of the vertices in this subset. Well, this is it. So you see, you have this is a simplicial complex in the first definition. It lives in a canonical affine space, and of course, each time you have some affine morphism from this affine space to some other affine space, which restricts, such that this morphism, affine morphism restricted to this simplicial complex is an embedding, so is injective. Then you recover this situation. You have a geometric realization of this finite simplicial complex inside the affine space E.
Don't you want the values to be positive?
Right, because as you know, the barycentric coordinates, when you take the convex hull, the barycentric coordinates are non-negative coordinates with
Yes.
sum equals 1, right? So think of
that I understand, but it seems you're also allowing negative values here.
For the supporting affine space, this is the supporting affine space where the value. So for the coordinate, there is a plus here, meaning maybe it's
But
not
here, yeah, there.
right, for the
Yeah.
for the actual simplicial complexes
Right.
collection, the coefficients are non-negative.
Yeah,
Whereas
yeah.
for the supporting affine space,
Right. But it doesn't seem to be what you're writing.
it doesn't seem to be what I did right. Again, it is because here.
Yeah. What is that sign there?
A plus. It
Oh,
means
it's a plus. Thank you.
yes,
Sorry.
it's a plus. Yes.
Oh, sorry. Sorry.
Right.
Sorry.
Well, okay. Okay, so what about examples? So I promised 3 classes of examples. So the first one is just the, say, convex polytopes, but convex simplicial polytopes of Rn. Polytopes in Rn. So of course, you know, famous examples among the regular polytopes, you have the tetrahedron, the octahedron, and so the icosahedron with 20 triangles. I don't put the cube because the cube, the faces are not simplices, but as a matter of fact, to be simplicial is generic in the following sense. If you take the convex hull of a generic collection of points, you won't not only get a polytope in Rn, but also a simplicial one. The boundary is just made of simplices. So a generic collection of no, the convex hull of a generic collection of points is a convex simplicial polytope. And of course, Rn is the ambient then affine space. Well, there is some relation with toric geometry, of course, and the famous theorem of Stanley, Billerali-Stanley, but unfortunately, I won't have time to discuss this. Okay. Now the next example, so these are rather subtle, I would say. So let me first give a definition. Let's first observe that in such a simplicial complex, say each vertex, actually each face, but in particular each vertex, has some canonical neighborhood, which is called the star neighborhood of the vertex, which is made of all faces containing the vertex. So say for every vertex of a simplicial complex K, the star neighborhood in K of V is the collection of simplices such that V is a face of K. So V is a face of sigma. So, for instance, if your vertex, if this is the vertex V, the star neighborhood is this neighborhood. And together with its boundary, because this is supposed to be simplicial complex as well, subcomplex. And by the way, the boundary of this star neighborhood is what is called the link of the vertex. So the link of the vertex is the set of phase tau in this neighborhood such that V is not contained in tau. In green in my picture. And then comes the second class of famous class say, of examples is the combinatorial manifolds. What are called combinatorial manifolds. So in this setup of discrete geometry, you have with purely combinatorial terms, you can define what is a manifold basically. And the definition is the following. So the subshell complex K is a combinatorial manifold if and only if for every vertex V, K, let's say the boundary, this link of in K of this vertex has a subdivision which is isomorphic to the subdivision of the linear subdivision of the boundary of the n simplex. So it's a bit technical, but boundary of an n simplex. Is a combinatorial manifold of dimension n. So it's a bit technical and a bit subtle, as you know, but what is nice in this definition, as I already mentioned, the performance, so to say, is that it's 100% combinatorial. There is no reference to homeomorphic to whatever. It's 100% combinatorial. So of course, I didn't define what is a subdivision. I guess you know, and I won't spend time on this. But so let me stress this fact that it's 100% combinatorial. So the simplex, the n simplex here, is the prototype of a ball. So what you expect for a manifold is that it has a chart, which is a ball. So this n simplex is a ball. And to define what is a closed manifold and not just a manifold with boundaries, so I rather introduce the link, which is a sphere. Okay. And the third example is what is just a triangulated manifold that is a finite simplicial complex, which is homeomorphic to some manifold. Triangulated manifold. These are the simplicial complexes homeomorphic to some, say, closed manifold. So these are three classes of example which one may have in mind. It is well known that smooth manifolds carry a triangulation. So, well, such an homeomorphism is what is called a triangulation. Then on the closed manifold, every smooth manifold has a triangulation which is a combinatorial manifold. And but the converse is not true. There are some combinatorial manifolds which are not homeomorphic to smooth manifold. And also there are famous theorem that's in every by Manoescu, that in every dimension of dimension greater than 5, greater than 4, there are triangulated manifolds. Well, manifolds which are triangulated manifolds which are not homeomorphic to some combinatorial manifold. And even on the phi sphere, there are triangulations which are not combinatorial, but so simplicial complex which is not a combinatorial manifold, but which is homeomorphic to a triangulated manifold. Okay. This was just examples. I hope it is not too much unclear, but whatever, these are only examples. So do you have any question so far? Okay, so the next part is more light and.
Hi, sorry, there were some questions. Sorry, I was taken away from it. Why is the word manifold used? Is it like a piecewise linear manifold?
That's true. That's true. Combinatorial manifold. A combinatorial manifold. So this was my second example. So it's a specific triangulation. But if you forget the triangulation, you may keep, I mean, in particular, it induces the structure of piecewise linear manifold. And any subdivision of it induces the same piecewise linear structure. So it's basically a couple, a pair. So it's a piecewise linear, it's the structure of a piecewise linear manifold together with a specific, say, finite triangulation compatible with the structure of piecewise linear manifold. So these are exactly the manifolds in my second example. So a closed manifold has a triangulation which is a combinatorial manifold if and only if it has the structure of piecewise linear manifold. Indeed. Okay. Thank you very much for the question. I'll come back. Okay, so let me go on. So let me go on with actually a notion which is very, very classical in say combinatorics, or people well, yes, studying polytopes, for instance. And this notion is the notion of shellable complexes, which in a way I sort of say extend in you'll see in a direction. So okay, so let me just recall what is a facet of a complex. So as I said, a finite simplicial complex is a collection of simplices. So there is a partial ordering by inclusion, because a face of a simplex is also a simplex. So some of them are just maximal with respect to the inclusion, and these are called facets. So a facet simplicial complex, finite set, is a face which is maximal with respect to the inclusion. Let me come back with my tetrahedron. So every vertex is a face but not a facet. Every edge is a face but not a facet. The facets are the 4 triangles. Well, when I mean here, when I mean the tetrahedron, I mean the boundary of the tetrahedron. So the boundary of the tetrahedron is a 2-dimensional simplicial complexes, and its facets are just the 4 triangles, whereas vertices and edges are faces, but which are not maximal with respect to the inclusion. And the simplicial complex is pure dimensional if and only if all facets have same dimension. Right? Well, I can add this. The complex is pure dimensional. And only if all facets have same dimension. Okay, so now what is a shellable complex, which is the key definition in this paragraph, say, well, a simplicial complex is shellable. Well, let me write it down. So let me write down the definition. Simplicial complex shellable if and only if you can order the facets. Give a total order of the facets, okay, if and only if its facets can be totally ordered. So I'll explain this. Sigma 1, say, or sigma 0, sigma capital M, in such a way that for every j in 0n, the intersection of the jf facets with the previous one, with the union of the previous one, 0 to j minus 1, is a union of codimension 1 faces. So let me explain this definition with an example, still the same. Let me draw you the pattern of the tetrahedron. So I hope you can see my picture. This is the pattern of the tetrahedron. So you just have to fold these 3 triangles to get back the boundary of my tetrahedron. I hope it's clear. You can see this? So if you look at this pattern of the tetrahedron, I can number the 4 triangles. So say 0 for the central one, 1, 2, and 3. And this numbering means what? So I can build the tetrahedron by adding 1 triangle, one after the other. So I start with the 0th one. So this is the central triangle. Then I glue the first triangle and it intersects the previous one along an edge. And the edge, that's fine, it's codimension 1 in the triangle. Then I glue the second triangle, and the second triangle intersects the first 2 along 2 edges. And 2 edges, that's perfectly fine. It's a union of codimension 1 faces. And when I put the third triangle, then this third triangle intersects the previous one just along codimension 1 faces. So this is perfectly fine. And this is a shellable simplicial complex. So you want to build up the complex by putting the facets one after the other. But there is this condition that when you add a facet, you have to glue it along the previous ones, along a finite collection of codimension 1 faces. So every boundary of a simplex is shalable, and it is a famous theorem of Brugesser and Mani in the 70s, that actually every convex polytope is shalable as well. Every convex, let me add simplicial because I'm working with simplicial complex, but actually it's true in general. This notion can be extended to polytope complex. Well, every convex simplicial polytope is shalable. So I can explain a bit the idea of the proof of this theorem. And the idea of the proof is the following. So imagine this, this convex polytope is the planet in which you live. And then you live on a facet, say, and you leave the planet in a rocket, with a rocket. So you have some rocket leaving the planet, and you are inside the rocket. Then the question is what you see on your planet. So when you start, the only thing you see is the facet from which you started with your rocket. And as soon as you are going further and further, your rocket basically will cross supporting hyperplanes to the other facets. And once it crosses these supporting hyperplane, you start to see other facets of the planet. And this is the way Brugesser and Mani prove that every convex simplicial polytope is shalable. So this is this is actually a rather strong property of a simplicial complex. And for instance, what you can prove is that, say, when it is pure dimensional and shalable, it has to be homeomorphic either to a ball or to a sphere. And actually, even piecewise linear homeomorphic to a ball or a sphere. That is to the, so every shalable, every pure dimensional shalable complex is piecewise linear homeomorphic to a ball, to a simplex or its boundary. And again, I can explain you why. Let's just come back to the definition. And this already introduced the point of view for what I want to do. So recall the definition. So it is shalable if you can add the facets one after the other. And I may think this ordering as basically as a Handel decomposition of the manifold of the complex. So when you put the first simplex, basically you are attaching a handle of index 0. It is a ball. Now, when you glue the next facet, you have the second, third, and so on facet. By definition, the facet you add has to intersect the previous one along a union of codimension 1 faces. Now, if you look what it means the facet itself is a ball, and the union of codimension 1 faces is a ball in the boundary. So, from the topological point of view, when you add the other facets, you are making a connected sum with a ball. And you are making this connected sum in the piecewise linear category, which has already been mentioned thanks to the question. So that's why when you make connected sum with a ball, nothing happens from the topological point of view. And it's only when you cap off with the last vertex, the last facet, in the example of the tetrahedron, which is glued along all its boundary, that the topology changes. And here you recognize a handle of index n. So that's basically the proof of this. Okay. So not only you have this rather strong restrictions from the topological point of view, but also even on the 3-sphere, not all triangulations are shellable at all. And there is a very nice result by Licorice, Thurs, and Hashimoto-Ziegler in the 90s. Ziegler, which tells you that a triangulation on the 3-sphere which contains a knotted triangle in its one skeleton cannot be shellable. This is the statement of Hashimoto-Ziegler. So let me write it down. The triangulation of the 3-sphere, special case, let's say. Triangulation of the 3-sphere which contains a knotted triangle in its one skeleton cannot be shellable. So here, when I say knotted triangle, I mean the boundary of a triangle, which is a circle. So I want this circle to define a non-trivial knot in the 3-sphere. And this circle has to be just made of 3 edges of the triangulation. And it turns out to be very easy to construct such triangulations. And this was done by Licorice. Because you just take a non-trivial knot, take basically any triangulations, maybe subdivide it if you need, and modify. You just have to modify it near the knot. So you delete the neighborhood of the knot and produce a new triangulation such that the knot has just 3 edges, and you're making cone on the boundary of the neighborhood, and that's it. So it's very easy to construct triangulations of the 3-sphere which are not shellable. By the way, there is some history here, because in the 19th century, well, the proof of the Euler characteristic, you come back to the polytopes. An easy consequence of the theorem of Brugesser-Mani that it is shellable is that the Euler characteristic of the boundary of a polytope is just 0 or 2. And this is completely elementary if you have this result. You don't need some theory of simplicial homology or whatever. And it was assumed, taken for granted in the 19th century, that this boundary of polytopes are shellable without proof. So it was taken for granted. So it was only in the 90s that it has been proved by Brugesser and Mani. And as I just said, it's wrong in general. Okay. Okay. So, any question? Okay, now let me come to the notion of tilings, which I want to introduce, which extends this. So as you see in my, okay, so so first, such a shelling, as I said, I can interpret it as some kind of handle decomposition of the manifold, but then what is missing is the notion of handle of intermediate indices, which I'm going to define, so to say. And another point of view is that these induce tilings of the subshell complex. So let me give you these two notions. So definition. So the terminology. So first, I define what is the basic tile. The basic tile is a simplex of dimension n and order k. Is a main simplex deprived of k dimension 1 PC. In dimension 2, there are 4 of them. You have the closed simplex, the closed triangle, so this is order 0. The triangle deprived of 1 edge, the triangle deprived of 2 edges, and the last one is the open simplex. So the order of such a type ranges between 0 and n+1, and the extreme values correspond to the closed simplex and to the open simplex. Okay. Now, what you can observe, so these are examples of what is called relative subshell complex. So I removed from a subshell complex a subcomplex. What you can observe is that a face of such a tile has to be of dimension at least k-1. The face of a basic tile of order k has dimension at least k-1. So for instance, you see, if you take order 1, so I removed 1 codimension 1 faces, and doing this, I removed all vertices except 1. So the minimal dimension of the face is 0, there still is a vertex here. Now when I remove 2 codimension 1 faces, I removed all vertices. So there is no more any face of dimension 0, and the least dimension is 1. It's this remaining edge. So that's why I'm writing here. And moreover, in dimension k-1, the face is unique. And the proof of this is very easy. So we can write the tile as a closed simplex deprived of k codimension 1 faces. And these are codimension 1 faces. And if V0, Vk-1 are the vertices opposite to these codimension 1 faces, then, well, any face mu has to contain all these vertices. So otherwise, if it does not contain one of these vertex, it is included in the codimension 1 face which has been removed. So any face has to contain these k vertices. That's why it's of dimension at least k-1. And in dimension 1, it's k-1, it's unique. is the face made of these vertices. Okay. I'm a bit quick because of time. And now, thanks to this peculiar face, I can define what is a critical tile or pinched handle of index k. It is such a basic tile where you remove in addition this least dimensional face. So definition: a critical tile of dimension n and say index k is a basic tile. Is a basic tile of order k of dimension n and order k. Right. Of this unique k-1 dimensional face. For instance, in dimension 2, I say the closed simplex or closed simplex deprived of the empty sets as a face is a critical tile of index 0. Now, the critical tile of index 1 is the closed simplex where you deprive an edge and you also remove the opposite vertex. This is index 1. And the index 2 is the open simplex. And you see this index 1 critical tile looks like one handle pinched. But I don't have much time to insist too much on this. Okay, so this is a critical tile. Now I can extend introduce what are these timings. Well, actually, I can put more in brackets. So, well, basically, tiling of a simplicial complex in this terminology is a partition of the geometric realization by such tiles, which are either critical or basics. This is a strong notion of tilings. So as you see, there are in dimension n, there are n+1 critical tiles, one for each index, and there are n basic tiles, because which I call regular tiles, which are the ones the simplex deprived of a number of codimensional cases ranging between 1 and n. So the extreme values are critical. So you find so there are n regular tiles and n+1 critical tile in dimension n, and you want to be able, so say for instance you have a manifold with a triangulation, you want to be able to tile the triangulation to get a partition of this using only such tiles, but supported by facets, of course. If this is possible, then you have a tiling. So, well, say for simplicity, let's say a pure dimensional simplicial complex of dimension n is well, H tileable for some reason, tileable if and only if there's a partition by basic or critical tiles, basic or critical n-dimensional tiles. And this tiling is moreover shellable if there is if you can put the tiles one after the other in order to get a filtration of the complex. Shellable, if and only there is a filtration empty sets K1 included in A capital N, which is the full complex, such that for every J, Kj minus Kj minus 1 is a time. So you see that if your tiling, for instance, uses only what I call basic tiles, then such a shellable tiling recovers the classical notion of shellability. But now I add this notion of critical tiles, and so this gives a more general notion of, say, a shellable tiling on simplicial complex. If you can put one after the other of the tiles to get a filtration by closed subcomplexes. And the main theorem I want to give now is a theorem of existence, that if you take every simplicial complex finite, then it carries such a shellable tiling, provided, if needed, that you perform some finite number of what is called stellar subdivisions at facets. So this is an existence theorem. Every finite simplicial complex carries a shellable H tiling after performing finitely many stellar subdivisions. Maximal cases. I would say this stellar subdivision at maximal faces, these are the simplest notion of subdivision. You just add the barycenter of facets and take the cone over its boundary. So this is the simplest notion, I would say, of subdivision. So you may have to do this finitely many times, but once this is done, there is such a shellable tiling. So you see what it means. So say, for instance, you have a triangulation on some manifold, closed manifold, say. Then you perform this finite number of stellar subdivisions at facets. This doesn't change the underlying piecewise linear structure, for instance. Once this is done, you know that there is such a shellable tiling. But this shellable tiling also, from the point of view of topology, so to say, is, I would say, a pinched handle decomposition of the manifold. Where, because at each time you add a tile, so either it's a critical tile, and then you're changing basically the topology by adding this critical tile, which is a pinched handle, or you are adding a regular tile, and as I said before, this is just making a connected sum with a ball, and making a connected sum in the piecewise linear category. So this is an existence theorem, and well, for instance, an easy, an immediate consequence is that because the chaining provides some filtration. This filtration induces a spectral sequence which computes the homology or the cohomology of the complex. And the first page of the spectral sequence is supported, is a free module, say, over the critical time, free graded module over the critical time. And another aspect is that actually such a tiling encodes a class of discrete vector fields. And when it is shellable, all these discrete vector fields are gradient vector fields of a discrete Morse function. This is something we already observed with Nermin Salehji some time ago. And so this encodes a class of discrete Morse function. And the filtration can be viewed as filtration by sublevel sets of this Morse function. Well, I see that time is over. So maybe I can just stop here, and thank you very much for, again, this opportunity.
Great. I'll applaud for everybody. Thank you very much. And there's time for any questions from the audience, either voice or chat. Maybe as a big outsider, but is your intention then to have versions of theorems from Morse theory that are applying in this context? Is that your motivation for this existence?
Well, there is already a discrete Morse theory which is quite developed. So a theory of Morse functions, right? But my motivation was basically to develop this notion of tilings. And as a matter of fact, for instance, if you come back to, there is also a theory of Handel decomposition. So as you know, every smooth closed manifold, thanks to, say, for instance, Morse theory, carries some Handel decomposition, some true Handel decomposition. And this theorem, this existence of Handel decomposition also works in the piecewise linear category. And this theorem of H cobordism or S cobordism has been proved for piecewise linear manifold with this theory of piecewise linear Handel. But for manifold with the triangulations, which are not piecewise linear, they cannot carry a piecewise linear Handel decomposition, because otherwise the manifold would be piecewise linear. And here you see that it can be corrected by this. So there is no true Handel decomposition, but there is this pinch Handel decomposition, which still respects the piecewise linear structure underlying given by the triangulation. And by the way, there also exists, I think, every closed topological manifold carries a topological Handel decomposition, except in dimension 4. But this is just topological, so it doesn't, if the manifold has some triangulation, so again, this Handel decomposition does not preserve this. Well, then it raises a question, for instance, of which I have no idea. I even didn't think of it. But can it be that closed form manifold carries such a pinched Handel decomposition, where the attachments then are just made by homeomorphism, not piecewise linear, but still, this is a question. No, again, my motivation, well, I started to study discrete geometry by another direction. So I was doing some random geometry, actually something related with algebraic geometry or Keller geometry. So like 10 years ago or more, with my colleague Damien Gaillet, in the framework of, say, real projective manifolds. So I did study the expected topology of the vanishing locus, say, of some ample divisor. So say you consider some projective manifold and some ample line bundle over this projective manifold, and say consider that this manifold and together with the bundle are defined over the real the field of real numbers. And then so if you put some say some Hermitian metric with positive curvature on the ample line bundle, and then consider the large tensor power of this ample line bundle. And then you consider the finite vector space of, say, global holomorphic sections of this large tensor power, which is a finite dimensional vector space, right? And this finite vector space, as is well known in Kähler geometry, inherits some Hermitian product from the Hermitian metric just by L2, the L2 Hermitian product. So you integrate, take two sections of the bundle, take pointwise Hermitian product given by the Hermitian metric, and integrate. So then on this vector space or the underlying linear system of divisor, you have some Hermitian products, and so some probability measure, which is the Gaussian measure. And if you do the same for the space of real section, this becomes the probability space. And there is the question, so if you pick at random section in this of this bundle, what is the topology of the divisor, so the vanishing locus of the section? So it's going to be smooth, almost surely, but over the real number, the topology quite depends on the section. So what is the expected topology? So what is the probability that it is maximal? So these are questions of measure theory or probability theory, which I started to study. And this is one model. This real algebraic geometry provides one model of random topology, I would say. There is another one coming from spherical harmonics or zeros of eigenvectors of Laplacian. And so my motivation was at the beginning to with Nermin Salji to define a third model, which is a discrete model. Basically, motivation was coming from toric geometry. So there is a theorem of real toric geometry. Okay, so this was the starting point. And then we found this notion of tiling, so you know as it is in research. So once you feel that there is something to develop, then you need to develop it. So basically. Okay.
Thank you. Any other questions from the audience? Going once? No? Okay, thank you very much again.
Okay, you're welcome.
All right. Thank you, audience. We look forward to seeing you in the next ZAG.